can you take us back to the moment where you, first felt the spark of like entrepreneurship? Like, because I know that before you were working at RCM, you were at some other places as well. But like, what prompted the idea of starting up your own institute or facility, or I don't know what you would actually call Anhar Institute, because there's so many things underneath it.
Right. Well, first, I don't know if I'd call myself an entrepreneur. It feels like a lofty title. But yeah, so I was the youth director for about 10 years in Nashville, Ohio, St. Louis, a couple different communities. And then I became executive director of a couple different nonprofits over the years. And so the idea of kind of a youth center started very early, around 2012, 2013.
So this is about 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah, conceptually, yes. So the idea behind it was really just trying to find the space where we could really, like basically creating a space for Muslim youth, right? Somewhere they felt comfortable coming, somewhere that wasn't necessarily the masjid where like anybody would feel comfortable coming, and build it up to a point where they could have a strong enough relationship with Islam, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they would feel comfortable going to the masjid.
So what made you think that like setting up the Anhar Institute would yield that? Like, I mean, like, because usually when people get into business, they're thinking, okay, usually money is one of the motives in the entire thing, right? How can I make more money, right? Was money a motivation, or was it the akhirah that was more the motivation here?
Yeah, so it was, somewhere, not money related, but it was more about serving people. So akhirah in a sense, but more so just about, in this dunya, how do we provide people a platform to get closer to their akhirah, right? So around 2018, so about 6 years after I became a youth director, so me and a couple of other friends of mine in Tennessee that were youth directors as well, noticed that there was just there's a big gap in terms of certification for youth directors. So there's not like a formal training. Anyone can kind of become a youth director. There's nothing really required. So what we did is we created Anhar Institute as a nonprofit to specifically create a certification process for youth directors, right? And so that was why we launched Anhar Institute initially. It was to develop youth directors, create a certification process, and to create and develop youth groups, right? So then like kind of the last aspect, the youth centers came in as a place for us to create something similar to the Hub. And that's kind of how Anhar Institute was created.
So did you ever feel like throughout the journey of building up Anhar Institute, did you ever feel alone in this, or that no one understood you, or that other people did understand your mission and vision? How did you clarify that? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes when they're starting out, they want to do 1,000,001 things. And how did you narrow down your focus to just doing that?
Alhamdulillah, for Anhar Institute, there's been a lot of support, I think, from day one. I think a lot of people kind of realized the need for it. And so it's, never really felt alone. And that's the thing, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of facilitates people, like-minded people together. So there's always a community and there's always understanding. Alhamdulillah.
If your younger self could see you today, right? I mean, would that person recognize you, like when you're 10, 15 years old?
Yeah, how young are we talking? How young are we talking?
Let's say, I don't know, in your teens.
Teens? Yeah, I think to an extent. So like mentorship has always been, a big part of who I am. So when I was young, I used to go to actually you don't know this either. Your dad's known me for a while, but I used to actually go to the Boys and Girls Club after school. Right, so both my parents were working, and so after school sometimes I would go to the Boys and Girls Club, and a lot of it was basketball and tutoring, right? And so from there I kind of found a passion for mentorship, and kind of looking after kids that were younger than me, and so I think that part was still identify with. But when I was in high school, pretty much like basketball, reading, camping was all I did. I didn't really focus too much. Actually, I was working at a TV station throughout high school.
Which TV station?
So it was a local access channel, so government access channel. So we did a lot we filmed a lot of what happened at schools. So like we did Game of the Week, for example, for Friday night football games. And then in college, I worked for UT, for University of Tennessee's TV channel. So I recognize the podcast setup at least.
So many entrepreneurs deal with those components, especially like if you're in a restaurant or let's say you're running a trucking company or something. So many struggles that happen, and usually if you were to graph all the moments that you have inside of a business, it looks like a roller coaster, right? Sometimes it's really, really good and going up, and then all of a sudden it just crashes and burns, and then somehow you come out of it alive, right? And the question that I want to lead into is more so like, so entrepreneurs typically tend to have that one moment of like get completely breaking down, right? Where everything is just totally bleak, and quitting is just like an option. It is an actual legitimate option at that moment. Did you ever have that kind of moment while you're trying to build Anhar Institute?
Honestly, no. Alhamdulillah, we have not hit that point yet. Um, we've been with the hub specifically. We've been open for a year, right? And so the hub has been the major project for Anhar Institute. So with the hub, alhamdulillah, hasn't hit that point yet. There's been ups and downs, but so far there's been just so much support from the community. And honestly, we launched the project because there was that support already. And so because of that, alhamdulillah, we haven't really hit like anything super low point yet.
I mean, do you have a fear in your mind that this might, fall apart at any moment in time? Does that thought ever creep into your mind? I'm just curious because when I was running my businesses, that is a thought that was very very, very present in the back of my mind. And maybe that wasn't healthy, maybe that was healthy, right? Because in one way that allows you to push in a direction and keep pushing to make it work. But have you ever felt that sensation or ever felt anything like that at all, whether in this business or any other business?
Right. So I wouldn't necessarily say fear, but there is a concern, right, of it not working out. But that's where it's a little bit different being in community work, right? There's that level of tawakkul that you wouldn't have in a normal kind of day-to-day business. And so for me, the concern is more so about not fulfilling the amana that we're entrusted with, right? So it's not fulfilling the responsibility. So the constant question and the constant push is, are we doing enough to serve the community? Are we serving him in the right way, with the proper adab, or are we kind of leading people astray, right? How far is too far? How comfortable is too comfortable when it comes to the people that you're serving? And so similarly to a business where you are concerned about losses, you're concerned about the direction the business is going in, we're concerned about the direction that we're kind of taking a community.
Yeah, I want to hear your take on this a little bit because it's like, this is an interesting question. Like, do you ever have, like, what struggles have you faced while doing outreach for the Hub or Anhar Institute? Because maybe you have a bit more of a on the ground approach and you can see things that maybe Asad can't see.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There's some things you might miss at a organizational level that you won't miss on a more, like you said, on the ground level. The benefit I have is that Asad has done all of both sides. So I also consider myself one of the people that he has mentored as well, alhamdulillah. So in that regard, it's the only challenge really for me, outreach-wise for the Hub is just explaining the concept, telling people that it's not just like another Masjid or something where we desperately need those places for so many reasons, and there's some things that we can't do there also. There's some things, some programs, or some types of engagement with the community that don't really work in those spaces as of now. So that's the only thing, is just educating people and trying to connect with them on a personal basis so that they see the vision as well. Because it even took me some time.
So is that the struggle of the Hub in itself, or like any nonprofit for that matter, would you say?
You want to handle that, or? I don't know if it's so much the struggle of that's the chief struggle of the Hub. I think that just comes with the territory of, like, I'm sure you said you've started several businesses. If you start anything new, whether it's in a tried and true field or not, the struggle is just getting people to know what you're doing. What's your vision for your project?
There's an education component, obviously, right? Because it's like, how many people would be educated or would want to learn about this? And like, it's not like there's like an Excel data sheet where, this many Muslims exist here and that they're going to be interested in this. And it's sort of like, how do you cultivate that kind of place or an environment which invites people in, right? And that's what I think you guys are aiming for ultimately at the end of the day. It's like we want to create an environment that so many people talk about it via word of mouth and social media marketing that it gets out so much that eventually you have an audience so big that you can probably even take over the entire building, right? And maybe the aspirations are higher than that. Maybe the idea is that you take Anhar Institute to multiple different states or even countries, but that's only limited to the mind of the individuals that are actually running it. So I actually want to pose that question to you, Asad, is like, where do you see Anhar Institute going? Like, I mean, because obviously you've only been established for a year. You must have had some sort of vision or business plan or idea, like, I want to see the progression of this happen within XYZ amount of time. I mean, walk us through that.
Yeah, so we're still kind of at a crossroads in terms of where we want the long term to be, whether it is franchising or creating chapters, or if it is like securing a larger footprint here in Atlanta. We're still kind of in between which direction we want to go in, and we've been doing a lot, alhamdulillah, over the last few months of surveying and talking to our stakeholders to understand exactly where the community thinks we should go. And talking to a lot of our mentors as well, just to understand what direction they think we should push in. But for us right now, what we're really focused on is impact. Since we're just in year 2, the big focus for the year is how can we make sure all of our programs are impactful? How certain are we that the work we're doing is translating into true impact within the community? Right, and so that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of the long term. Our big picture, right, is and this can be your soundbite, but is to become the YMCA of the Muslim community, right, or like the JCC.
Hey, that's admirable. I mean, like, we don't have anything like that for Muslim Ummah, right?
Right.
So
the vision is to really have like a full, true community center in every community across the country, right, and every Muslim community across the country.
I mean, that's very admirable. I think. Definitely a soundbite. And I mean, like, let's take it even further. Like, what if it could, like, I mean, my mind would go like, how quickly could I get it expanded out to even other places? It's just, I find it just very admirable. And like, you'll have so many lessons along the way that you're gonna learn that, maybe we shouldn't have made that decision. Maybe we should have made this decision. Maybe we shouldn't have made this decision. But this leads me to my next question: is have you had to take any hard, or have you had to learn any hard lessons while building this out? Either one of you, actually, both of you.
Yeah, I think mine is hire the right people,
That's a struggle I've actually had to face, where like hiring the right people has been very tough for me, especially in the restaurant space. But if we're talking about like the IT sector or any other place, like different sectors have different pools of talent to pull from. So it's different for each and every different sector. But in your case, you hired, obviously you had, and then I don't know if you've had the chance to hire people underneath you, or maybe you guys did it as a joint decision. Walk me through that process a little bit. Like, what is your process to hire people and to identify the right fit?
So I'll jump in. So the thing is, right, since we are so early on, like year one of any business, we didn't actually start payroll yet, right? We waited until this year to officially start payroll. So we've all just been kind of scrimping and living off savings, right? Alhamdulillah, year one we broke even, which is rare, right? And so for us, the hiring process will begin more earnestly now. What we took the initiative of doing is essentially all of our kind of volunteer staff that had been on the executive committee, we hired them on full-time or on part-time roles. So we're starting off with those roles. And from there, we're going to hire. We are hiring like a cafe manager. So the process for that is we've been putting out an application. We've gotten some interest from a few folks. We're going to start to interview them, and then we'll hire them onto the team, inshallah, once we know where we want to go with that. But if I can, I wanted to kind of go back a little bit. So you asked a question about like what has been some of the biggest challenges, right? And I was joking about staff, but in terms of the biggest challenges, I think partnership is really has been the biggest challenge, is understanding who to really collaborate with, who to partner with, and why. So one, staying true to our mission, but then also evolving our mission to fit what the need is in the community, right? So the hub has kind of become more of a central place, a unifying space for a lot of different organizations. So instead of having one central, community that's consistently at the hub, it is a space for multiple organizations to come in to bring their community members, and it's almost like a kind of an ecosystem, right? It's just so many different organizations coming in, so many different groups coming in and utilizing the space, that it's become almost a home for like 5 or 6 different orgs, right? And so one of the biggest challenges has been understanding just who do we really want to bring in, and how can we serve them properly.
It's almost like you're doing co-working mixed with religion, mixed with, you know, like a mixture of even more stuff than that, right? It's like you're having classes, it's a hodgepodge of so many things. Right. Not to say that's a bad thing, but I mean, that's so interesting. Like, so I want to hear a little bit more of your take. Like, I mean, where have you found difficulties or struggles within the business? I mean, and how do you seek help, or how do you seek assistance?
I think one hard lesson that I had to learn, honestly, is ask for help. If your organization or your business or whatever, if part of your mission statement is that you want to build a community, you want to serve people, you want to provide services that are relevant to them, that are, you know, welcoming and compassionate and all that, then ask them. Just bring them in on the process. And then that way, especially when you're building something, they feel a part of it, and people feel like, you know, this is something for me or my family, my friends, or my kids, my spouse, right? My you know, community, and this becomes their community. So you just have to honestly just ask people, bring them in, and be willing to take advice, and be willing to, you know, let go of your own perception of what you wanted to do, your own vision, concrete vision. This has to be like this. You can adapt it according to, you know, what the people need. Yeah.
For me, Islam is so important in terms of how I do business, right? So whether it's a business deal, a business transaction, if I'm leveraging debt, which we should not do at all, right? But we live in a society where that's pretty much prevalent, right? Have you ever found issues in terms of running the business itself? Like, have you had your Islamic ideals clash with Western values in terms of making decisions for the business itself?
So far, no. Alhamdulillah.
So did you self-fund this? How did you fund even purchasing, putting on the deposit and all that kind of stuff? Right. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so we are leasing right now. And so it's less of a barrier to entry, right? For us, we had a group of stakeholders that almost immediately, so the way that we started the Hub was when I was laid off from RCM, I had a group of community members that actually approached me and said, hey, we want you to stay here. We want to continue that same quality and level of programming that you've been doing. What can we do? And so, you know, I talked with Ziad, I talked with a couple of donors. We came together and said, like, this is the project. What do we think? And we brainstormed ideas behind it, and then they committed to donating immediately, right? So they committed before we even had a concept, really. And so with that initial funding, we then launched the space. We went and got, went after a few more donations, and that's how we've been thriving, alhamdulillah, so far. And as the project grew and grew, more people came on board, and again, it's just been community support really the whole way.
Wow. I mean, that's so interesting. I want to actually rewind, because a question just came in my mind, was that, so the people that you mainly hire were the volunteers that you originally had.
Right.
Yeah, so then that way you already knew if they were a good fit or a bad fit. Right. And in a way it was like testing out to see, hey, what kind of character does this person have, and do they mesh well with our personalities? Right. And that way we can be even more successful. Right. And if they didn't, then obviously they would weed themselves out as a volunteer.
One thing also, just to touch on, is that one thing Asad always explained to me is that if you want people to be involved in community work, you should be paying them. It's nice when you put in so much time and effort and you get your reward from Allah, and we all agree, but at the same time, if you're gonna ask people to go above and beyond, you should pay them. You should give them an opportunity to benefit in this world as well from the work that they enjoy doing with you. So that's another key component, I think, that helped us get to the second year as well. Yeah.
One of the things that comes into my mind also is, like, especially if you're married, right? Like, is your spouse supportive of your goals, your ideals, your vision? I mean, both of you, because I mean, like, I know that at some moments in time it has. I mean, I've been tested. I think everybody's been tested to a degree, right? How did you navigate those kind of struggles and pains if you ever had them? And like, cause like I know like if
Say more.
Listen, if you want to join us on the couch,
Or we can take turns lying down. One person sits here.
Yeah,
we
it
can
can be a
really
therapy
really
session,
open
right?
up. Yeah.
So the Hub offers mental health services.
No, absolutely, go for it. But Asad, if you could.
Yeah.
maybe-
So I think we're both laughing because our executive committee is actually the two of us and then our wives, and Idris is the fifth. So for us, our spouses have definitely been supportive because they're on the team, right? They're engaged in the work more heavily than we are, right? And so everything that you see here has been a product of all of us working together. So alhamdulillah, for us, that hasn't been an issue in terms of support. Now, in terms of working with your spouse, that's a whole other thing, which I'm not going to touch, but I'm going to pitch to Ziad.
Yeah, so I'm going to deftly pivot slightly, maybe for good reason, but I think honestly, I do think that when you work in a space in which people have passion and have a commitment to the project, to the business, to whatever you want to call it, regardless of your relationship to that person, it can create sometimes like some difference of opinion, even like a minor difference of opinion can, become like a bigger one. But then the only way you get through, whether it's a relationship or a business relationship or a co-working relationship, you have to communicate. So I think that has helped. We have weekly meetings every Friday, for example. So every Friday we meet, we make an effort, even though it's difficult, in terms of we both, Asad and I both live separately, pretty far away from each other and from this place, but we still make an effort to meet in person. We make an effort to communicate on, by phone and stuff like that, and just talking. So I think if you don't have communication in any relationship, period, what do you.
It's difficult. So what does communication look like between you, your spouses, and the executive team at large? Like, what does that look like? Because it may be different for you guys, obviously, right? And it may be different for a different set of entrepreneurs because maybe their version of communication is, a checklist. So, like, what does that look like? Describe it to me.
I think at least for myself and my wife, we try to keep work things in a work bubble. So if we're discussing something about this space or, the work we're doing, we preface the discussion by saying, okay, so this is going to be a work conversation and we're going to be more structured and, and like that. And we try not to let it carry over too long. So if you have a meeting at work, you have a time limit, right? Or you have, certain things that you're going to discuss specifically and it doesn't bring in other topics, right? Which is not the case if you're in a personal relationship with someone.
Of course.
That's a normal
I
thing that
mean,
happens.
because the thing is, in your particular scenario, right? You're working together and you're living
You're
together.
living together.
So, I mean, things crisscross, and then,
Of course, yeah.
I mean, they blend, right? And it's sometimes not easy to manage. For some, it's horrible. For
It's
some,
just your
it's like,
intention.
of course.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if you clarify the intentions up front, like, hey, this is how we should manage it, then things become substantially better, right?
Yeah.
Especially if both parties are on the same page.
Yeah.
So, I said I'm gonna. You're the next.
I'm just gonna steer back into the skid. He was definitely avoiding. So, all jokes aside, I mean, I think for us the big key to communication really is we try to block and tackle as much as possible, but it's really ultimately just being patient, right? We on top of working together, being married, all that fun stuff, we also had a 1-year-old when the Hub started, right? So the whole first year was then also raising now a toddler that wants to run around and be at everything. You have a program at 2 in the morning, in Ramadan, what are you going to do?
She's
right?
part of the planning committee. She's part of the decor committee. She's part of the, logistics. Yeah.
So really the communication struggle is real, but it just comes down to being extremely patient, right? So I like to go back to the story of Musa and Khidr, right? Where there was always one person that's right and then there's me, right? So that's kind of how I like to treat it. Just always listen to my wife 100%, and whatever she says, we follow. Alhamdulillah.
So there's one thing that we always hear in entrepreneurship, actually for the past couple of years, is like, hustle culture, right? Gotta hustle, gotta hustle, gotta hustle. But nobody really talks about the sacrifices that go along with it. And I'm guessing you spending time with your child, obviously, that's a sacrifice you're having to make in order to build this for the ummah at large. What's outside of that? Has there been anything else that, the business has cost you that you feel like it's taken from you? And maybe also for you as well, Ziad, because if you're also you're so heavily involved in this business, it's also taking away from personal aspects of your life too. I know it did for me.
Yeah, it's always time, right? It is very time intensive. First year of anything, it's a large time commitment. So you do feel like you're spread very thin. But it has its own reward. I think for me, it's gas money. Living an hour from here has been costly. Honestly, it's just been time, really. I know I don't want to speak on Ziad's behalf, but they were recently married before we launched the hub. So the first year of their marriage was in the middle of the hub launching, right? And so I think we all had a lot of big family stuff going on. And then this kind of happened right in the middle of everything. So the biggest sacrifice would really just be that time.
I've honestly time, same thing, and it becomes extremely evident when you're like, okay, well, we should definitely talk about whatever we need to talk about for sure in our personal relationship, but I'm busy from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 10 to 10, things like that. When you have a startup or any kind of business like that, you're going to put in more hours, both of you, if you're working with the person you're living with. It's going to happen. So the time thing, but again, like Asad was saying, it's patience helps you appreciate the time that you're spending working together and living together. It helps you, manage both of those.
Do you feel like no matter how much you accomplish, it's never enough? Or is that just, because I know I have that inside me, I achieve something, but maybe it's a toxic or negative type thinking, I guess. I don't know if it is really, but or maybe it's Allah put that in a person, right? Where you've achieved, but you feel like you can achieve more and more. And maybe Allah put this in men in general, or even women, right? Do you feel that it's that it's never enough?
Yeah, I think there's always an element of that, of just if you're ambitious, you're always seeking to do more, right? No matter whether it's fiscally or not, or the success of your business, or just what you're producing, the programming, whatever. There's always an ambition to do more, and that's when you weigh the costs. What is the sacrifice that you have to make in order to achieve that? For us, I can say for me at least, alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to see the product of what we're doing immediately, right? So we have, the fruit of our labor. We can see it immediately. We have community members that will come up and say, this is how this place has benefited me so much. And because of that, it's very rewarding work, and it helps you kind of rein in that ambition a little bit to know, I can either do 1,000 things and do them poorly, or I can really focus in on these 10 things and make sure they're outstanding, right? And year one for us was do the 1,000 things, right? As much as we can, and we pushed as hard as we could. Year two has really been pull it back, reel it in, and then really focus on quality. And so we have a few programs that you'll see coming up next month that really highlight that change.
So just out of curiosity, where does your hunger, or drive, or ambition come from? Because that's something that, my dad has always asked me the question, is how do you cultivate that within a person, right? And it's not, sometimes it's innately given by Allah, sometimes it's it's created. So I don't know where it actually comes from, but I'd love to know where you believe your hunger or drive or ambition actually came from.
Right. So for me, not to get too philosophical, I think that having been a youth director and kind of the way that I've grown up and things that I've seen people go through a lot of the worst things in their life, right? Which as a youth director, you'll get a call from a parent that their child is wanting to commit suicide, right? And you have to go in and see what you can say or do, right? Just try and help in any way you can. And so for me, dealing with that in other people's lives and dealing with just whatever has happened in my own life, it's my drive really comes from serving people as much as possible. I think that when you're running a business or a nonprofit, sometimes the operations will muddle that. Sometimes you'll think so much about your ambition and how much you want to push things that you lose the thread. And I think that is a real issue and a real concern for me. But my ambition truly, really does come from how can I ensure that there's no child or there's no youth, Muslim youth here, that ever needs something from the Muslim community and doesn't get it. Right? That's my goal. Is to we know a lot about mental illness now. There's a lot of the stigma has been removed, but it still exists. For me, my personal goal is to make sure that no one ever feels that they're that alone, and that we can provide a space where no one will ever feel that level of loneliness. And so that's kind of my personal drive, is to create that sort of a space.
What about you, Ziad?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is not to get, he's got philosophical, I might get personal, but I'm also not going to speak on his behalf. But for me personally, I can say that, sometimes as a human being, it just happens, you go up and down in your own life, you have your own struggles, and being able to relate to someone currently going through a struggle, it feels like you went through that struggle in your own life for a purpose. And it gives you the hope and the confidence that, okay, maybe I can serve this person. Or maybe I happen to be the person to be placed in front of them. And I might not, this might be the first time I'm talking to them. This kid after a talk or something, and I said something that connected with them, and they come and talk to you about it. And you're privileged, or you're blessed, and it's your responsibility to be the person in front of that other person going through something. So that's where, for me, like, if I start feeling like I'm flagging in confidence or drive or something, it's without fail almost that Allah will place something in front of me that I was able to help them to some degree. Whether or not it's actually helpful, I don't know. We'll find out.
And just to add in, I know we both said youth and high school, right? So our focus as an organization really is young professionals and young families, and it's the same gap, right? As young professionals, right, or as somebody with a young family, there's a lot of struggles that we're going through, and oftentimes it feels like you're in the dark. There's no one to turn to for that, and so that's what we work really hard to do, is to provide that sort of space and provide the resources.
I mean, it's the same thing in entrepreneurship in general. Like, usually when we try to achieve something, we focus, almost laser focus on something, and we're so alone throughout the journey that we wonder, is it even worth it, right? And sometimes some people go down that path of like, oh, I don't feel like it's worth it anymore, and they think about ending their life in some ways, in shape or form. And that's not healthy, obviously. I mean, a good example of this would have been the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Yeah. So many ambitious people, and then next thing you know, they don't have any money, and they're like, their life is over. Had they waited 5 years, everything would have recovered, right? But it comes down to the patience and the timing component of it, right? If they have tawakkul in Allah, obviously, if they did have that, then maybe they wouldn't have done that. And the awareness of that. But entrepreneurship has always been a very lonely, at least in my life, it has been a very lonely journey, and I haven't had many people to talk about it. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to start the pod. It was like, hey, how can I talk to other people who are experiencing something similar, and how can we help each other grow, right? And I think that's a very similar mission to what the Hub is.
You wanted to create a community of people that you can relate to.
That's your new tagline, a podcast born of trauma.
It's not a bad one, actually.
It's not a bad one. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. We'll bill you later. That's
Sure.
Donate now at Anhar Institute.
I'm definitely leaving that in.
You can't turn this guy off anyway. Yeah.
I've been watching too much YouTube.
So this leads me to my next question. Is like there's some entrepreneurs who tend to feel imposter syndrome sometimes, or a lot of people actually feel it when any normal task, even in some cases. Have either one of you ever felt that throughout building either this company or any other?
Yeah, of course. I mean, 100%.
On a daily basis, weekly basis?
24/7?
Currently?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think definitely, right? And anything that you do, you always have that concern. And yeah.
I think there's
How do you deal with it?
Go ahead, yeah.
No,
How do you
you
deal
tell
with
me,
it?
man.
Oh, man.
No, I think what I do is to focus, and this, I mean, it sounds like I'll just say dumb, but to focus less on like my concern about what I'm feeling going through something, and more so to focus on the why behind what I'm doing, right? And so if I can focus on the purpose, then it kind of just pushes me to say, all right, forget your concerns about it, just push through and get it done. Who do you need to consult with? Who do you need to go to that will have the answer and get that answer and then execute it?
What about you, Ziad?
Yeah, it's the same thing. The only thing I would add is that you, like I was saying, like you're put in front of a tough situation and you start thinking like, am I the person to deal with this? Am I the right person? Is this going to work? Like if I get involved, will I make it worse, or was I supposed to be here? And it's difficult maybe in those moments to step back and say, okay, well, you were. But one thing that can center you is just always keeping in your mind that like, you're the person in this situation now. This is what's happening currently. Just ground yourself and understand that you need to get through this portion. That's really it. Like you were saying in the financial crisis, you just have to ground yourself. Sometimes it's very difficult.
I mean, whether you're the guy or not, the need is there.
Yeah, the need's there. And it'll like he's told this before to me at least, but he heard maybe I'll tell you. You can say it like, you know, the need was there before you arrived, when you're there, and after you leave. That's something that he heard from one of his teachers that he always is stuck in my head all the time. That also is very grounding to be like, yeah, you're just here now, and that's good. So do something. Yeah.
Is there any piece of negative feedback or criticism that has either affected you deeply that made you reflect, and did that change anything in the business itself?
Like ever, or negative feedback here?
Ever.
Like with this project?
Let's do ever.
Ever.
Forever.
Okay. How much time do you have?
Plenty.
Okay,
Plenty.
cool.
I know it's a little bit of a different question. I want you to think about it.
Yeah, I think for me it's not necessarily like direct negative feedback, but recognizing in situations where, and going back to ambition, I didn't need to do as much as I wanted to do, right? That I could have just relaxed and just let things develop, right? Just work with everyone, right? So I was working with people that, you know, I didn't agree with. I feel like we were coming from different mentalities and different methodologies. And instead of just kind of like letting that play out, letting that stew a little bit, I just wanted to kind of jump in, fix it, just move forward, figure out a way to get around it, you know, constantly like just fixating on how do we fix it. And so having patience in that and just waiting and just seeing how things materialize, I think has been the biggest lesson that I learned previously and that I applied here, was to just kind of sit back a little bit and just kind of let things materialize. So like day one, we wanted to launch Sunday school, right? We waited a year to launch our Sunday school. And when we finally launched it, I think it was at a time in which it was more beneficial than it would have been if we just went off immediately.
It sort of reminds me of, there's, I don't know if it's a saying in the Quran or a hadith, I don't remember where it comes from. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, have a beautiful peace, right? And I've noticed even in entrepreneurship, just in general, if I'm patient with an outcome and I don't react immediately, I notice that I actually get a better result.
Right.
And that's just been a profound learning that I've found. If I had reacted immediately right there on the spot, my reaction would have been extremely poor. And in a way, it's also not living up to the standard that the Prophet ﷺ left up for us, right? So if we want to live to a better standard, a better quality, a better everything, then I think having that patience, that beautiful patience that he mentions, right? And then observing and then getting to a point where like, okay, I understand it now. And it sort of comes back to your story of Musa and Khidr, right? Right? He was making a hole in the boat, or, you know, killing a child, God forbid, you know? But it's a story in the Quran, and it's like, oh, there was something to be learned from that moment. If we have that patience, it leads to even greater levels of success to a degree. Have you had any kinds of experiences like these?
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea that if you pause for like half a second, it's not as serious as you might think it is, because you're like totally laser focused, and you miss the
It's the moment,
forest
right?
or the trees.
You feel like if I don't do this, it's not gonna get where it needs to go.
This is going to be a major problem.
Yeah. I guess it's how do we figure out, hey, do we need to take a step back, and how do we emotionally regulate for that to a degree, right? And that's not something that entrepreneurs or even people in general are taught.
Yeah, definitely not. It's something you have to learn through hardship and getting it wrong like several times. And then again, it's wisdom. Wisdom is just what you learn from doing things wrong. That's it. Like, you just keep messing up. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, when it all is said and done, like ultimately, what do you want to be remembered for?
This might sound like a bad answer.
I think it's a bad answer, man. It's your
Well,
answer.
wait till he says something else.
Yeah. Sorry, that's what editing is for, right?
Right.
I don't care to be remembered, personally. When I was a kid, right, and people asked me, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was really, like, I don't care. I want an office job where I can just work 9 to 5. My dream was to have a family. I wanted to have a wife and children. I want to go home and just hang out with them, right? That was really all I cared about. And even now, no matter what I've done in the last 15 years, 20 years, professionally, it doesn't hold a candle to me to really like being a dad at this point. And it's part of that responsibility that pushes me and again gives me that drive and ambition to build all of this, is really to make sure that I am, taking care of my daughter, so that, 15 years from now, if she ever runs into any trouble, right, there are places like this that will, inshallah, exist. In the Muslim community, competition in communal settings, competition is one of the most readily available things. Anytime you start a program, you start a space, anything initiates, there will be 1,000 knockoffs, right? Just like in business, in products. And that's the great thing about the Muslim community, is that a knockoff will always exist and will continue to exist. And so 20 years from now, 15 years from now, no matter what it is, we're contributing to that having some form. Does that make sense? Like, there's some thread of it coming down the line. And so, long story short, I don't really care to be remembered. I just hope that what work we have done is, inshallah, accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has some benefit for people, and that work continues to be applied.
Yeah, same. I'm not interested in being remembered, but the only thing I would like to be remembered for is perhaps somebody saying, oh, I went through something and there's some person, some dude, I don't remember his name, what he looks like, where I might have met him, but he said something or he talked to me, he listened or something, and he was just like available to me at that moment, and it helped me through like, something minor or major, and that's how they feel about me. They don't know who I am, they don't recall. That's always been my ambition when I was a kid. Just be like, can I just be there for people? And if I can be anonymous, that's even better. Oh my God, that'd be like a dream come true. That'd be amazing. Yeah.
I mean, in my case, I'm just gonna, even though it's technically not a question posed to me.
So what would you like to be remembered for?
I actually don't think I want to be remembered either. Okay. And the reason is simple. I think, 100, 200 years down the road, will anybody remember my name? Realistically, no, right?
Man, Daniel's a pretty common name.
But I mean, it's the legacy that I want to leave is a feeling more so than anything else. The feeling I want to leave behind is, was I a good person? Did I impact the Muslim Ummah in such a positive way that they were able to build businesses off the back of the information that I gave them? Yeah. And is that my sadaqah jariyah for me to enter Jannah? Maybe. I mean, my mom, she passed away about 8 years ago. And she was an amazing woman by all stretches of the imagination. I mean, I would say she was the ideal mother. She was ideal everything for me, personality-wise, perfect matches, right? Where I was very much an introverted child. She was the one that pushed me to become the extrovert. So you couldn't imagine me today being an introvert. It's very, very difficult for a lot of people to imagine that. Mm-hmm. She was the one that always would push me out of my comfort zone. And she was the one that would sell clothing out of, the basement of our house. and I would be the one holding up the clothing and measuring things and taking apart, clothes just so that she could turn around and sell those things. And I hated it at times. But I realized, you know what? Entrepreneurship is a mixture of doing the things you hate and doing the things you like. And when you blend them together, if the overall feeling is good, then you should continue doing it, as long as it is bringing an impact to people in a positive direction. And usually that's a better motivator for success than capital or money, right? And that's one of the reasons why I do the pod. It's because I believe that in a way, it's my version of a sadaqah jariyah. I can also benefit humanity at large. I can create better networks for myself, right? And bring more value to other individuals. Because if we don't become an economic powerhouse, then where are we as a Muslim ummah, right? So that's the direction I like to take, right? You're heading for the youth and young professionals. My goal is a little bit different, in the sense that, hey, I want to reach people who are already successful but struggling. How do I guide them better? Because let's say they have 50 gas stations, right? How can we find an alternative for them and another alternate investment vehicle that would then permit them to actually earn the pleasure of Allah, versus them continuing to operate those gas stations which are selling alcohol, which are doing things that are totally haram, right? So this is where the aspect of Islamic finance and like business transactions comes into play. Like, many people are not educated about this in the Muslim Ummah in general. They're mainly educated about practical family matters more so than anything else, right? Because that's what most imams are trained on, right? So they don't know the jurisprudence of fiqh of business. They don't. They might read in their madrasa or their teaching or their school, whatever. They'll read Sahih Muslim, and they'll read Kitab al-Buyu and the books of business transactions and stuff like that, but they won't apply it. Or they think, because we're in a Western country, we have to follow the laws of Western land, that we can go against our religion, and that's shaitan basically speaking to them. So these are things that we have to actually go into and understand. These are issues within our community, at least from a business perspective. How can we empower them to shift over, rather than, you're running a gas station, that's haram, right? Because that's a mentality a lot of people have too. But not a lot of people have this mentality, this is haram, we get it, let's find you something else that will be better, right? Because Allah always mentions, at least in the Quran, that if you run away from the haram thing, He will replace it with something that is much better for you, right? Sort of like from a haram relationship, you go into a halal one, as an example, right? There's barakah and blessings in this, and there isn't anything in here, right? So it's like anything that's good and that's righteous, that should be the aim and the goal. So that's the legacy I want to leave behind. If you could give yourself one piece of unfiltered advice to a young Muslim entrepreneur that's just starting out, what would it be?
Just distill. Hire the right people now. So just keep going. At the end of the day, you're gonna face a lot of ups and downs. So just keep pushing through, and find the right mentorship. Actually, I'm gonna change it. Find the right mentorship.
How do you find the right mentor?
All right, I'm gonna change it back now. I think depending on what your field is, obviously, find people that have had more experience than you, and that you think would be able to relay that experience to you, number one, and number two, that you would be able to relate to. I think the hardest part in finding a mentor is finding someone that you will actually listen to yourself, if you're hard-headed like me. So find the right mentor, and to do that, find people that you can relate to.
What about you, Ziad?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I mean, the piece of advice I would give is if things aren't going your way, there's some circumstances in which you want to stick to the script and keep trying, and there's some times where you have to just understand that this is not going to happen the way that I would need it to happen, because that's like a huge pitfall that I think that all of us face whenever we're trying to do anything consistently. But knowing which approach to take, I think that's where this mentorship comes in, and then understanding that there might be a Khidr alayhi salam or somebody who knows way more than you, and that's an okay thing. It doesn't mean you're an inadequate person. It just means that you're piecing together something that is beyond your knowledge or capability. So just take advice. That's like number one. Be okay with taking advice. Yeah.
If today was your last day on Earth, what would you regret not doing in your business, your life, or even in your faith?
That was the last day on Earth. Plant a tree, man.
Plant a tree. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. The shade of which you will not enjoy. Yeah. Plant a tree. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say. That's a good answer. You didn't have to go that hard, but yeah. Wow.
And man, that's the hadith.
That's literally the best advice, yeah.
Well, where can people find you on socials?
All right. You can find us at Anhar Institute on Instagram. Anharinstitute.org is our website. I don't know if anyone's still on Facebook, but we're not on Truth Social.
Not Truth Social, yeah. Sorry.
We have a WhatsApp group where we post all of our events, everything that you need to know. And so definitely join that WhatsApp group, and we can hopefully flash up a QR code or something later on. Or find us in the comments, tag us, and we'll hook you up.
On Instagram as well, Anhar Institute on Instagram. Same thing.
And man, we're on YouTube as well.
YouTube.
You're on YouTube as well?
We are on YouTube.
So we'll definitely link that down in the comments section or the description section down below.
Sure.
But it was a pleasure having both of you gentlemen. It was a wonderful time, actually.
I appreciate you taking your time to have us on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If this video gets 10,000 likes, we will fire Ziad. So
Hold on a second.
It should be 10,000 likes and a bonus.
Yeah, I don't know if you've met him yet.
like and subscribe now.